I know there's been some anonymous sourced reporting that there was maybe a 3 to 5 day deadline. That is not true. The president has not set a deadline himself.
Trump grows so terrified of Mujtaba that he refuses to set any firm deadline for the critical Iran deal negotiations. The White House denies setting a deadline after Iran captures 2 vital ships right in the Hormuz Strait. Trump extends the ceasefire indefinitely, as the US secretly admits its stunning defeat in the escalating war. The US Navy stands utterly embarrassed while Iran executes ruthless revenge for America's ship hijackings. Captured on camera, IRGC forces seize Israel-linked ships despite the imposing US naval blockade presence. On April 22, the United States denied reports suggesting it had given Iran a firm deadline to submit a nuclear deal proposal, seeking to downplay the perception of an ultimatum. Earlier that day, media reports had claimed the US had given Tehran a window of 3 to 5 days to respond to a proposal for a permanent ceasefire. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told reporters that President Donald Trump has not set a hard deadline and that the timing of Iran's response would be flexible. Leavitt noted that Trump has shown a bit of flexibility by extending the ceasefire, allowing Iran more time to weigh the US offer without an immediate hard cutoff. She explained that this flexibility is intended to give Iran's leadership space to deliver a unified response, rather than a fragmented or internally contested position. The White House said that the ongoing negotiations with Tehran are focused strictly on Iran's nuclear program, distancing the process from broader regime-level demands. US officials have outlined clear red lines, including preventing Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon and securing the transfer of its enriched uranium stockpile as part of any agreement. Iran, however, has instead proposed to downblend its enriched uranium rather than hand it over to the United States, offering a compromise that would reduce enrichment levels without full physical transfer. Meanwhile, conflicting reports continue to circulate about internal divisions within Iran's leadership, with US officials suggesting that the political and military wings are not fully aligned. US officials told Axios that there is a clear disconnect between the civilian-led negotiation team and Iran's military and security leadership, creating a fragmented decision-making environment. Anonymous US officials said, and I quote, "We saw that there is an absolute fracture inside Iran between the negotiators and the military, with neither side having access to the supreme leader, who is not responsive." Unquote. Meanwhile, Tehran has rejected the current model of US pressure and has not yet committed to a concrete timeline for resuming diplomacy on Washington's terms. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian has said that the US naval blockade is the main obstacle to genuine negotiations, arguing that talks cannot proceed while Iran's ports remain under siege. Iran's parliament speaker and lead negotiator, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, has also insisted that pressure-based tactics will not work, warning that coercion alone will not bend Iran's negotiating posture.
Great questions, and I will answer them. Let's level set on where we are. As you all saw yesterday, President Trump announced an extension of the ceasefire. He's maintaining and generously offering a bit of flexibility to a regime who has been completely tarnished because of Operation Epic Fury. There's obviously a lot of internal division. This is a battle between the pragmatists and the hardliners in Iran right now, and the president wants a unified response. And so as we await that response, there's a ceasefire with the military and kinetic strikes, but Operation Economic Fury continues, and the effective and successful naval blockade continues as well, of ships and vessels that are moving to and from Iranian ports. We are completely strangling their economy through this blockade. They're losing $500 million a day. The Karg Island is completely full. They can't move oil in and out. They can't even pay their own people as a result of this economic leverage that President Trump has inflicted over them. So he's satisfied with that as we await their response, and we will see. The president has not set a firm deadline to receive an Iranian proposal, unlike some of the reporting I've seen today. Ultimately, the timeline will be dictated by the commander-in-chief and the president of the United States. Well, we obviously know who we're negotiating with because our negotiating team has sat down with those individuals in person. But obviously, there's a lot of internal fraction and internal division, which again just proves the effectiveness of Operation Epic Fury in the first place. You know, there's been some anonymous sourced reporting that there was maybe a 3 to 5 day deadline. That is not true. The president has not set a deadline himself. Ultimately, he will dictate the timetable.
On April 22, Iran released a video showing its naval forces seizing commercial vessels that it described as linked to Israel, increasing pressure in the Strait of Hormuz. The ships were accused of violating maritime regulations that Iran has imposed around the strait, according to a report by Iran International. The footage was described as the first video of this kind of enforcement operation since the war began on February 28, giving viewers a rare glimpse of Iran's new blockade-style posture. Iran's semi-official Tasnim news agency reported that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, carried out the operation, underscoring its role in controlling the waterway. Amid the ongoing standoff with the United States, Iran claimed to have seized 2 ships and taken them to its shores, portraying the move as a test of its authority in the region. This marks the first confirmed instance of Iran formally detaining foreign-linked vessels amid its own blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, crossing a threshold in the naval confrontation. The IRGC also issued a strong warning alongside the operation, emphasizing that it will treat any attempt to interfere with its control of the strait as a serious provocation. The IRGC warned that any disruption to order and security in the Strait of Hormuz would cross a red line, indicating that further incidents could trigger a more escalatory response. Reflecting these tensions, Brent crude prices climbed above $100 per barrel for the first time in about 2 weeks, driven by growing concerns over supply disruptions. The rise is being linked to the dual effect of the American blockade on Iranian ports and Iran's parallel efforts to restrict certain shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. Major economies are now drawing down strategic reserves and cutting consumption where possible in an attempt to manage the economic impact of the tightening energy squeeze. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps attacked a 3rd ship on April 22 in the Strait of Hormuz, Iranian media reported, escalating tensions in the strategic waterway. The attacked vessel was identified as the Euphoria, according to New News, Fars, and Mehr, which all reported the IRGC strike on the ship. Iranian reports said the Euphoria had become stranded on the Iranian coast, without elaborating on the exact circumstances or damage. The IRGC also separately attacked and seized 2 other vessels, MSC Francesca and the Epaminondas, in the same area. The Guard said that the violating ships Epaminondas and the Israel-linked MSC Francesca had endangered maritime security in the Strait of Hormuz. According to the IRGC, both ships were operating without the necessary permits and had tampered with their navigation systems, which it described as a threat to navigational safety. These incidents came just after Trump, on April 21, extended the truce with Iran but refused to lift the US blockade around Hormuz, keeping naval pressure in place despite the attacks. The first Iranian reaction on April 22 to the US ceasefire extension was sharply critical, with Tehran signaling that it views the move as more tactical than substantive. A senior advisor to the Speaker of Iran's parliament issued an outright dismissal of the US decision, arguing that Washington should not portray the extension as a diplomatic concession. Mahdi Mohammadi, an aide to Iran's lead negotiator in the Pakistan-mediated talks, publicly warned the US that the truce extension would not alter the underlying power dynamics. Mohammadi stated that the extension means nothing and stressed that it does not change the ground situation, where the US blockade on Iranian ports remains in place. Mahdi Mohammadi said, and I quote, "Trump's ceasefire extension means nothing. The losing side cannot dictate terms. The continuation of the siege is no different from bombardment and must be met with a military response. Moreover, Trump's ceasefire extension is certainly a ploy to buy time for a surprise strike. The time for Iran to take the initiative has come." Unquote. Additionally, Iran's ambassador to the United Nations, Amir Said Irvani, revealed Iran's core red line in an interview with the Tasnim news agency. Irvani said Iran is ready to negotiate, but only after the United States ends its naval blockade on Iranian ports, positioning the lifting of the siege as a necessary first step. He described the US blockade as a direct violation of the existing ceasefire agreement, framing it as an act of economic warfare rather than a legitimate enforcement measure. According to Irvani, Iran has already communicated this condition clearly to US officials through diplomatic channels, leaving no ambiguity about Tehran's minimum demand. The Iranian envoy hinted that once the blockade is fully lifted, talks could swiftly resume, possibly in a neutral venue such as Istanbul. Irvani also suggested there are signals that the United States might be considering some easing of the blockade.